You are listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with Rob Reed and Josh Galicki, bringing together the love of nature and photography. Episode 6. We discuss the benefits of photography projects. Well, hello everybody and Happy New Year to you. Well, a belated Happy New Year to you because it's halfway through January when we're recording this. But welcome to the latest episode of the Wildlife Photography Podcast with me, Rob Reed, and my co-host, Josh Galicki. Hi, Josh. Happy New Year to you.
Hey, Rob. Happy New Year. Hope everybody's doing great.
Yeah. How's it going?
It's going well. It's cold, windy, and damp, but there's still things to photograph, thankfully.
Well, I guess that's winter for you.
This is true. Yeah, it's not as cold as it used to be, but it's still chilly here and there.
Yeah, well, we've just had 3 weeks of rain, non-stop rain and wind, so it hasn't been conducive to too much wildlife photography, I can tell you, but still, never mind. What did you get up to over the break?
Well, I've tried to go out here and there over the past couple of weeks, really the past month, because the seasons have really transitioned now. I've gone from a lot of, and I'm on the eastern. We talked a little bit about this in previous podcasts. So I'm on the Chesapeake Bay on the eastern shore of Maryland, and I've gone from wading birds like egrets, herons, and some shorebirds to waterfowl and swans. Thankfully, there's been about 25 to 30 tundra swans that have been hanging out in the cove behind the house. So I've been spending time with them, playing around with decoys, which have worked really, really well. I've actually picked up some swan decoys. I even have some duck decoys that you put batteries in and it looks like they're foraging and their butt moves and it's got a ripple in the water. I've been playing around with all these different setups and it's worked really well. So a decent amount of waterfowl, lots of geese, some tundra swans, and it's nice to see the change in the seasons. It's harder though to go out there and shoot on the water because in the winter it can be rougher in terms of the wind. It gets wavy. I like to go out when it's calmer. I've got a float blind, and I found through through the learning curve, it's a lot harder to shoot when you're in a floating blind, and you have one.
And you've got waves.
Yes, it's not a good idea.
Coming in and flooding you.
Yeah. My subject is in focus for about a half second, and then I'm up and then back in focus, and salt water everywhere.
That's an interesting insurance claim, isn't it?
For sure.
Oh dear! No, I got away to as we were sort of talking off air. I got away to south coast of Wales over the break, and we spent Jennifer and I spent Christmas in this cottage, which was right on the beach. We wake up to the sound of lapping waves and an oyster catcher and curlew and turnstone and all those sorts of wading birds. It was fantastic. I just wish we could have stayed there for longer, to be honest. I mean, I managed a couple of mornings out with the camera briefly with these things, literally right outside the front door. It was fabulous. But Wales being Wales, the weather never stays too good for too long, so you have to make the most of your opportunities. So the second half of the week was a little damp, shall we say. So that curtailed too much sort of photography, unfortunately, but it was great to get away, to be honest, and have a break. But
the pictures looked incredible. I saw some of the pictures you posted. It looks beautiful there.
Yeah, no, it didn't really have long with the camera, but the times that I did get out with it, I think I've got some nice stuff. I'm sort of wallowing around in the wet sand and getting filthy dirty and freezing cold and wet through. It was all good fun. That was all good fun. But you've only got like a small window of light, really. From where the sort of sun was coming up, and but no, I like sort of backlit crashing waves and making some silhouettes and that sort of thing with these things on the rock. So it was all good fun.
It was all good drama to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But funny you should mention your sort of backyard, because I thought what we'd do for this podcast, seeing as it's the sort of first podcast of the year and everybody's obviously still sticking to their New Year's resolutions and what have you, we'd actually talk about photographic projects and sort of working on projects and focusing on one or two things, because that's certainly something that sort of helped my photography, particularly actually last year. And the benefits of doing that. And I've got a couple of sort of projects in mind that I want to work on this year. And you were saying to me, as we were sort of chatting before we started recording, about, obviously the sort of backyard you have with this new house, and the birds you've been photographing there.
Yeah, I've been spending a lot of time just photographing around the house, and that's really my plan for the next year. Before I moved out there, I lived in the city, so all I would think about is, okay, where am I going to drive to? Where can I shoot? Now that I can shoot in and around the house, it's exciting because it's photography, but at the same time, it's exploration. Counting the amount of bird species that come through the yard, that migrate, maybe that breed near the house, but also there's all kinds of other stuff: eastern cottontail, muskrat, fox. So there's all different types of animals. So I really want to document the change of seasons. What species are there in the winter, and then of course spring, summer, and fall. Um, and get familiar with some of the animals. Even in the past couple of months, I start to even name some of the birds because I see them every
Yeah.
day. So it's a lot different than popping in on a location maybe a couple times a year and looking for opportunities versus actually trying to photograph in and around your house. It makes it more challenging, but it's also more rewarding, I think, too. If you screw up or you don't get the shot, there's always the next day, obviously. And I've got a little pollinator garden. I put it in late summer, so I'm expecting it to really start to grow in the spring, and that'll introduce some macro opportunities as well with invertebrates. So some snakes I've seen in the yard. So yeah, it's that's going to be my project, and trying to get out as much as possible.
Yeah, sounds like you've got quite a few things to have a go at, but I
Yeah,
think sort of when you have a project like that in mind, it really sort of focuses your attention on the sort of various details of it, uh, more so than just sort of going out ad hoc and photographing in various different locations throughout the year. I mean, going back to the sort of backyard, you'll get to know, where the sun comes up, how the light falls at certain times of the day. As you say, you're even naming some of your birds because you see individual birds and you recognize them. But working with these things on a regular basis, I think you really get to know the nuances of everything really well, and that just sort of adds to the creative process. I
yeah,
think once you've got the sort of, because I don't know about you, but when I sort of look at a project, I start with the sort of standard photography, and then I add in little layers and I take things to another. So take, for example, photographing birds in the back garden. I'll start with the standard bird on a stick with the sun behind me approach, get some nice shots of the various species that are coming in. And then I'll start flipping things around. Maybe I'll shoot into the sun. Maybe I'll do this. I'll change a background. I'll change a perch. I'll change an angle. I'll shoot at a different time of day. And it's a very iterative process, I think, that takes you down a much more creative path than, as I said, just going to this location or that location, and you do it once or maybe twice. I really don't think you get the most out of it. So having some sort of focus, I think is can be really important.
yeah. I totally agree. You're right. Actually, you hit the nail on the head when you said iterative, because it really is. I can think of a great egret, which is a fairly common bird in the cove behind my house, and I call this bird GE. I named it GE. That was its nickname, and I would see it, you know, every day for a couple of weeks. It would forage in the same spot, and you get to learn the behavior. So initially, I found it. I had um, a 600 millimeter lens in my kayak. Then I started to go with wider angle focal lengths to get different perspectives. And again, you can improve upon that. And yeah, that's why I say, and I think we've discussed this even prior in another podcast, but I think the best photography is always local, because it's the situation where you understand the light, you understand you have a better understanding of the animals, their patterns, and most animals are habitual. That I've found, if you observe an animal for a while, you tend to learn its patterns. But that's where you can plan and execute, I think, high quality photography versus, being on a game drive for a week in Africa once a year where, you know, you're not going to get the same shots as somebody obviously who lives there or can do more.
No, exactly. And I just think that well, personally speaking, I don't think I could ever get bored of photographing the birds in my garden, using that sort of example again. You just think about different ways in which you can do it. I mean, I said, I have maybe 5 really common species that come into the garden all the time. And, you think, oh, it's a goldfinch again, I mean, they're probably the most common bird in the garden. I mean, I get dozens of them. But it's a beautiful thing. And there are so many ways in which you can photograph that bird. It's just your imagination and your mind which is stopping you from exploring those things. And I think, the better you get to know the species and the better you get to know the location and, as I said, where the light falls and everything else, the more experimental you can be. And I think that's a really one of the really positive aspects of working on a project or working with a species or working in a location again and again and again, as you get so much more out of it. And I think one of the other important aspects to working on a project is that I think for myself, and and I'm sure that this will resonate with you, Josh, as well, because I know it does with a lot of the other people that I've spoken to through wild art and photographers in general. And that's when you start to lose your focus a little bit, and you get into that situation where I can't be bothered to go out. Do you know that feeling you get sometimes when you just think,
oh yeah,
I'm just a little tired of it. I can't get enthusiastic about it. And it was, well, I know it was Andy Rouse said to me, Rob, work on a project. When I was going through one of these periods, it was about 18 months ago, maybe. Get yourself a project, focus on it, and that will get you back into the swing of it. And it did, because I chose to focus on the 3 lakes that I have close to the house and the water birds on those lakes. And I just went back again and again and again and used the light in different ways. And, so I was photographing the same species again and again and again, probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 different species. But it was repeat, then do something a little different, add another twist, repeat. And I've ended up with thousands of images of silhouetted coots, for example, in the early morning mist. That's that sort of thing. But the more you take, the more you get practiced at it. The more little sort of subtle little nuances you can throw in there, and those are the things that I think start making the difference between a picture that we've all seen before and then something that you can then go, oh, hang on a minute, I've seen that before, but I like that little twist to it. Do you know what I mean? And
absolutely.
I just think that it can be a very important or very useful process to actually get you refocused and get your mind back into what you really enjoy. And I tell you, I had an absolute ball doing this last year. I loved every single minute of it, and I did it for probably 2 or 3 months. And
Wow.
I just loved it, and I want to try and get back into it and revisit some of those situations. And you also find yourself taking pictures of other things that are there, but you don't come across so often because they're rarely seen. It's like otters. Well, they're commonly seen, but not in the right sort of weather conditions. And I had a couple of opportunities to photograph those last year as well, because I'd been spending so much time there. So, I think it's working on a project and having a sort of goal or a set routine almost with those sorts of, I think can be a really, really important tool to make sure that you get yourself out of sort of photographic malaise, which I sometimes find myself in. I don't know whether it's the same for you.
Yeah, every so often for sure. And one thing I will say, when you're shooting locally or you have a project and you have repeat customers in terms of subjects, it increases your empathy and your awareness for ethics around these animals. We talked about ethics in a previous podcast. On my property, I've got some bluebird houses set up for eastern bluebirds, and you care for these animals, and it just reminds you that you want these animals to be around. You want to see them next month, next year. You want them to come back. So it's deepened my, I think, sympathy for ensuring I give them space, and even though I want to get great photographs, that I respect them as well, because the last thing you want to do is a good example, bluebirds. So I have these bluebird boxes set up. I could easily put a beautiful manicured branch in front of the bluebird box where they land on the branch and I can get a photo and then it goes into the. But I don't want to introduce something new into the environment. Why put potential stress on the bird for a photograph? It's not worth it. So, in doing this and shooting around the house and going out there constantly and getting to know it just reinforces a lot of principles when it comes to ethics, when it comes to empathy for the animals, because you don't want them to leave. You want them to stay. So um, it's helped kind of fasten my resolve around some of those concepts as well.
No, that's a really interesting thing to say, actually, because it's, as you were talking there, I was thinking, actually what you're recording is almost a relationship, isn't it?
Yeah.
As you're taking these images, you're kind of recording the relationship between you and what you're photographing.
Yeah.
And I think as that process develops and the images improve, maybe that's an important element that I hadn't really considered before. I think that's really quite interesting what you've just said, actually. And
I've even left a lot of my decoys. I leave them in the water for days. And there's a strategic reason, because right across the cove there's some hunting blinds there, and I don't want them to go.
yeah,
Duck hunting is a big thing, and I totally understand that, and I respect that. It's part of the culture. I'm not a hunter, but I'd much rather give him a chance over on my way than go the other way. So certain ducks have large clutches like dabblers, but we get sea ducks, Rob, where they have some of these. They have maybe one egg, right? So their
yeah.
reproductive cycle. And when you look at some of the numbers, they're just crashing in certain areas. So I'm trying to do my part, much to the dismay of some hunters, to spare some birds.
Oh, good for you. Well, that's another subject we could talk about maybe another time. Is how photography is perhaps helping conservation, particularly from taking over from the sort of hunting aspect of things. Because I've always said that you can shoot a bird, an animal, whatever, countless times with a camera. You can only shoot it once with a gun.
Yeah, that's right.
You know.
And I see a lot of, and again, this is a separate topic, but especially when it comes to waterfowl, you see the picture where it's posted on social media and there's, lines of ducks or geese. And I'm thinking, are all these birds really going to be consumed? Are they? I hope so. But you just hope it's not a wasted life. It's a
Oh,
difficult thing, but
oh, don't get me on it, because we'll start talking about pheasants again, which we touched on before we started recording. And I've seen literally hundreds of pheasants after a shoot, and I know what happens to them. Big hole in the ground, in they go.
yeah. Yeah.
There's an old saying, actually, an old English saying, which says about pheasant shooting that it's up goes a crown, down comes a penny, or something.
Mm.
But people pay a fortune for it, and anyway, I've never really understood it, and the damage those the introduction of those birds does is immeasurable, really,
Yeah.
in this country. But anyway, let's not deviate.
Turn the wheel here. Go back on
Exactly.
course.
Yeah. Forget I said anything. So, have you got any sort of specific projects other than your sort of garden or backyard birds or animals in mind?
That's the main one, documenting, the change in seasons around the property. The Chesapeake Bay, that whole ecosystem has changed a lot, actually, over the past, 30 some years. A good example, Canada geese, which is not everyone's favorite bird species because they're all around, they're on the golf courses and everything else. But most of them historically would migrate from Canada down to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Things have changed, things are warming. Most of them now overwinter in the Chesapeake Bay. So we get them in the thousands. So
Wow.
just, tracking how they're coming in, how many that I can see, the dates around these, the different species. So that's going to be my main goal, I think. And it's a pretty big project. Just I'm going to try to get out as much as I can. I have a little kayak so I can get in the water and just explore this cove. The cove behind my house is called Broad Cove. And it's pretty big and it opens right up to the Chesapeake, but it's great for birds because it's pretty shallow. High tide's about 3.5 feet. Low tide is maybe a foot. And sometimes there's mud flats for shorebirds and, great for egrets and stuff like that. And then other stuff, white-tailed deer, muskrat, fox, possum. There's a decent actually variety of mammals and some reptile. It's great for frogs too, tree frogs, spring peepers, all that. So that's
Wow.
going to be the main push.
It sounds like you're almost going to create a photographic diary with
Yeah,
all the stuff.
that's what I'm trying to do. If it's nice,
Yeah.
I'll try to get out every evening because it's got a western exposure, the property, and after work I can go out, especially in the warmer months, where the sun doesn't set until 8 o'clock, 8:30, 8:45 sometimes, and you get twilight even after that. So I can go out each night, and it's pretty easy to pick up one lens. And what I started to do, and I'll do this as well this year, as part of this project, is go out maybe one week with a 200 millimeter lens, go out another week and force myself to shoot, maybe, I don't know, 24 to 105, and go wider. And that'll force me to create different compositions in different settings. And then sometimes go tight, like a 600 with maybe a 1.4 or 2x tele. So I think I'll mix that up as well to show the habitat, but also show different views of the animals.
Now, that's really interesting, actually, because when you talk about projects, we don't necessarily just have to talk about single species project or a single location project. We could also talk about, well, actually, I'm going to take a wider angle lens and I'm going to use that as my project. I'm going to photograph, wildlife with a wider angle lens, and I'm going to do that this year or for however many months of the year and just see where that sort of takes me. I think that's so it doesn't actually necessarily need to be restricted to locations or certain species. I think that's a really good way of looking at it as well.
Yeah, variety of perspective, I think would be very unique. And I haven't done this and I'll have to speak to some folks, but I'd like to get an underwater rig for my camera equipment because in that cove, it's great for Maryland blue crabs, which is, the symbol of Maryland. They're all over and they hurt, by the way. If you ever get pinched by those things, it is not pleasant. So I'd like to get some shots of them underwater. It would be simple, frankly. I see them all the time. I was going to do it with my GoPro, but I'd rather see if I can get like a dome and some strobes. And
that would be really cool, wouldn't it? Try and get that sorted. But that's an expensive business.
Yeah, big time. And if I only want to go 1 foot, 2 feet underwater, I'm gonna try to not throw too much money at it. But
yeah. Well, I tell you what, why don't we look to try and get the next guest on the podcast? Why don't we look for an underwater photographer?
Sounds good to me. Because that's way out of my element.
Yeah, and then you can get some advice.
Yeah, that sounds good. Two birds.
In fact, one of the new judges on the Wild Art competition next year is an underwater expert, so maybe we'll get him on.
Sounds good.
I'll try and line him up. Anyway, we digress again. Which, well, it's just the nature of these things, isn't it? But
it's better than swimming. You could just put it down, and just I don't even have to get underwater. I won't even need a snorkel for this one. So.
Well, actually, you could probably get away with one of those cheaper housings then, couldn't you? Those the ones that obviously don't take too much water pressure. You can't take them down too deep, but be perfect for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the things, in fact, it's one of the things I've been thinking about as well as, in terms of the sort of water birds is like, well, how can I take this to the sort of next level? And I kind of been thinking about, well, maybe I'll try getting in the water with them this year. So not, with a floating hide or a blind, as you call them across the pond. But perhaps just with a camera mounted on a tripod with a bit of scrim netting over myself with some neoprene waders, and doing it that way. And because I know if I did that, they'd come pretty close, particularly if I got in perhaps before dawn and just waited. And it may well be that you could have a chance encounter with an otter or something like that as well, which would be pretty cool. But the sort of next sort of stage of that would be perhaps sort of looking for that underwater housing that would give you that half and half shot.
Yeah.
So you've got, you can see what's under the water as well as what's above the water, because the really good thing about the lakes that I photograph in is they're all fed by chalk streams, so the
Mm.
water is gin clear,
Oh, that's
particularly
nice.
in the winter when you've had some cold weather. I mean, it's quite unique, so it would work really well. So that's something that I've got in the back of my mind. Maybe
Okay.
not this year, but that might be something that I look at next year. But another
Yeah.
thing that I've been thinking about, particularly over the last few weeks, because I haven't been able to get out because it's been chucking it down with rain, is actually photographing birds in the rain.
Mm.
Something that I've sort of dabbled in a little bit in the past, but actually the possibilities and the opportunities for it, I think, doing something a little different, it's quite exciting when I think about it. And the subtle use of perhaps introducing a bit of flash to backlight some of the raindrops, that sort of thing.
Mm.
I'm quite excited about that. So that's sort of going through my mind at the moment. I've tried a little bit, in the garden a couple of years ago, and people will have seen, I'm sure, a couple of shots I posted on social media. But I think there's a lot further. I could take that a lot further. It's
Yeah, and
that's something that I want to get into.
it's enjoyable. I did it intentionally. I went out on a shoot. When was it? Last year. I had an American bittern. I was in a wetland, and I was in waders and and it was pouring down rain. And you can play around with shutter speeds. Certain exposures. You get the water going off the bill. I mean, it makes for some pretty captivating portraits. I think. I really enjoyed that shoot. By the way, I will tell you, Rob, the floating blind you should have really good success with. I've found it works great when it comes to getting close to water birds. What I've done, I've actually taken some decoys and I attach them to the blind. So when I move with the blind, the decoys come with me. So, I've got a floating, armada here with me. So I'm flanked by some golden eye and some tundra swan decoys. And if the water gets too high, and I've learned my lesson on this, so I would put on waders, neoprene waders, but depending upon the water level, when you have to dip down to your camera, you want to get your camera near the water line. I would get water coming in from the chest or from the
Mm.
back. So I was talking to a friend of mine. He recommended there's this thing they sell called a paddling jacket. So I got this paddling jacket and I put it on over the top of the waders, and it goes down to my waist, and you could seal it pretty tight, and that prevents water from going in. Some of the wetsuits, the dry suits, they're really expensive. It's $600-700. I'm thinking, is that is the juice worth the squeeze on that? So this paddling jacket, it's worked fine. So I just put
Oh,
it over the
that's
waders.
really interesting, because that
Yeah.
was one of the dilemmas that I had. I thought, oh, how can I get the camera really close to the water? Because I know my elbows are going to be in the water, and at this time of the year, it's bloody freezing.
Yep. Yep.
So I'm going to get really uncomfortable really quickly. Can I do it with with a waterproof coat, or can I do? But actually, presumably that's sort of a kayaking, canoeing type
Yeah.
garment, is it? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I'll send you a link if you're interested. It's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
unfortunately the
Do.
one I have is like super bright blue. So
I
once
was
I
going to
come out of
say,
the
do they
blind,
have come in
everything.
really bright colors? Don't they?
Thankfully, I'm in the blind. Everything would fly away a mile away if they saw me come
Yeah.
out of that thing. But it's actually worked really well. And I bought the Mr. If I'm saying it right, Jan gear. It's Swedish, so I think it's Jan gear. And that's expensive. I think it was like $750 US dollars. But
Yeah.
it's easy to put together, and it keeps my lens pretty close to the water. So it's
Yeah.
nice, and you can just walk around
I've
and
been
float
looking at
it.
those. I just know that the lakes near me, literally, there's probably 7-8 feet of water right off the bank in lots of places.
Oh
So
wow.
it's just, yeah, it's really quite difficult, and you do not want to be going out of your depth in a pair of waders, people. Please don't do that,
Once the water
because
goes in the waders, it's Davy
you
Jones's locker, I think,
you're
right?
done. You're done. I mean, I've done a lot of fishing in the past. I can tell you, water going into chest waders is not a good idea, and getting out of
I,
your depth. Yeah.
I learned that the hard way, actually, because I got a boat recently, and I'm not a boater, but I got like a small skiff for, like, fishing, as you were saying, Rob, and some photography. And I was bringing it to this little boat ramp, and this fisherman in the Eastern Shore, it's almost Southerns, the accents, and this guy was a fisherman, he was an older guy, and he said to me, and I had waders on because I always wear waders. I was getting off the boat, and he's like, son, you better take them goddamn waders off. He goes, that boat goes upside down water and you be good as dead. And then he gave me this whole speech, and I said, okay, I got it. And I looked it up and I did some, so now I no longer wear waders in a boat.
No, it's a dangerous thing to do in deep water, right? Yeah.
You be good
Try-
as dead.
Yeah, try getting those off in a hurry.
Yeah.
No, I think, my sort of first stab at this, I think, is going to be water level. I said just on a tripod, in a pair of chest waders with a bit of scrim netting over me. And I think I'm going to try it like that to start with, and because they're quite confiding anyway. If you're, if you don't move around too much, they'll come in quite close. But I've noticed that particularly little grebes, they're a little bit more nervous than some of the other duck species, and actually it's gadwall as well. Gadwall are more nervous than mallard. Mallard are fine; they'll come in because they think you're going to feed them.
Yeah.
But I've noticed
I have
that
gadwall in the back too. You're
yeah,
right. They are a little
gadwall will give you a much wider berth.
Yeah.
So it's those sorts of things, I'd kind of like to get in quite close. And even things like great cormorant, they'll come in close sometimes if they're feeding and that's preoccupying them. But other times they will also give you quite a wide berth. So it would be nice to get a little closer to them.
Yeah, I find if I'm mixed into the shoreline, if I take that blind and I'm in under a pier or by some of the rocks or just in on the shoreline, much more confiding. If I'm out and it just looks like a big hump or a rock and I'm just moving, a lot of some of the ducks and swans will get freaked out and they'll start swimming away. But I've noticed if I put the decoys around me and I'm swimming with the decoys, they're a bit more confiding. It's so you can potentially get close. So just
that's
tricks of the trade. Yeah.
That's genius. That is. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody actually using decoys like that before.
I bought too many. I have I want to say, I'm embarrassed to say this, I probably have about 45 decoys. I just went on. I probably had one or two beers and maybe a martini, Rob. I don't know. I was on Amazon and I just ordered, and I loaded my cart up, and all these decoys showed up. I'm like, well, I want to get goldeneye. I have bufflehead, green wing teal, swan. So anyhow, my shed is just nothing but decoys. It looks like an aviary in there, but it's fun.
Fantastic. Oh dear. Yeah. But the other thing that I thought about, I've been thinking about for a while, and I think I'm so blessed where I am with hares, brown hares. They're not as common as they used to be. I mean, they used to be probably, I would think sort of 8, 9, 10 times the number that there are now. But having said that, there are still numbers of brown hare within walking distance of the house. So I could go out, I could walk 10 minutes, and I could probably find one early enough in the morning. So, this is, again, going back to things that are accessible and are close to you, and you can, generate a relationship with and an intimate knowledge of. And I'm just thinking, why am I not doing this? I mean, there's such a photogenic animal. They're so charismatic. Why am I not doing this? Particularly as we're coming up to boxing season, and the opportunities there are kind of endless for all sorts of, nice, artistic, interesting shots. But I need to be putting in the groundwork now on those. So, yeah, I really need to sort of delve down that rabbit hole. Pardon the pun.
And I suspect over there, the young ones are really cute. I mean, that we have, I've got Eastern Cottontail where I'm at, and the young ones are adorable. The little bunnies when they're born.
Yeah,
they're some of them were born under my shed, and I'm like, oh, these are the cutest little things ever.
Yeah, and it's funny, but talking about hares and things like that, I actually came across one, really, really close encounter with one the other night, because the evenings are obviously, they get dark pretty early, and I took Sky out quite late the other day. Normally I get her out in the daylight. In the afternoon I get out for an hour and a half and go and sort of stretch my legs and get some exercise. But I got her out pretty late, and it was almost pitch black, And through the head torch, I had these eyes glinting back at me, quite close to the ground, and I thought, I pretty much know what that'll be. That'll be a hare. Just because they just sit on the ground and they just hunker down and they just hope that you don't see them. Literally, I was within 4 feet of this thing before it took off. Wow. I couldn't believe how close I got to it. It was quite incredible. And that kind of gives me another idea. You think, well, actually, don't really see any pictures of these at night like that. That would be an interesting project to work on as you sort of develop the idea a little bit further. So, once you start thinking about projects and giving yourself a focus, all these other little ideas start creeping into your head, which is what I love about it, really.
Yeah, camera trapping, to your last example, is a great opportunity to do around your house. I mean, you own the property, you can see what the comings and goings. That's something I have not done as much that I really want to experiment with. I've done camera trapping on other properties in Pennsylvania and some other. I've actually even brought my stuff to Africa one time when I was over there, but I haven't done a lot of it at the new house, and I should, because fox are active at night. Great horned owl I have active at night. And who knows what else is moving around, maybe possum, raccoon. So it's something I need to do, because again, there's so many variables, but that's what makes it fun. You can shoot macro with insects, you can do camera trapping. It's just, it's just mind blowing when you think of the opportunities. You really don't have to go far to excel in wildlife photography and have good opportunities.
Well, we're talking about camera trapping. Khurram's picture comes to mind. Is the skunk?
The skunk, that's a great image. Yeah,
that was fantastic. And I bet you he tried for a long time to get that. I mean, you'd know.
Yeah, he did, and he kept getting feral cats. There's a lot of feral cats, I think, in his neighborhood. And then finally, the skunk showed up. We traded notes on a lot of stuff. And as a matter of fact, there was a book that came out. He's a UK photog. I think he won Wildlife Photographer of the Year some years ago. It was a shadow of a fox against the wall. Is it Richard Peters? Was that his name? I think it was. He came out with a book on just camera trapping and backyard photography. It's a great read. I'd recommend it if I can remember the name. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I'd have to look.
Well, look it up, and maybe we can put a link in the show notes or something.
It's an amazing reference guide, and it really helped me get started in terms of equipment, suggestions, and stuff like that.
Well, I tell you, that's another podcast idea. I could write this down as we're talking, actually. These little ideas that come out of these discussions. But, as I said, this is what the podcast is kind of all about. It's, it's not really a sort of formal thing. It's more of a chat between friends and see what happens. So I don't know where these are going half the time. Oh, dearie me. But no, I said camera trapping. We'll definitely have to do that, because I know that's something you've been doing quite a bit of.
It's a lot of fun. And there's some accounts that I follow. It is Richard Peters, by the way. I'm looking it up. He was the author on this book.
Oh, I don't know him.
Yeah, he had a famous shot of a fox, a shadow of a fox.
Well, there you go.
Wall years ago.
Bird and animal shadows, silhouettes, and things like that. That's another potential project to work on.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot more silhouettes, just because I have, as I was saying, I have a Western exposure, so the sun's setting, and it's quite easy for silhouette, and it's a lot more fun too, I think. When you start in wildlife photography, everybody does front lit. Have the sun behind your back. Only to a few do. And after a while, obviously, you want to branch out from that. So it's a lot more fun, I think, to have the sun in the opposite direction. It gives much more opportunity to be creative.
Well, that and putting things in context and putting things into their environment, as we've talked about before, that's another great sort of potential project for people to work on. That's something that's been in my mind as well, because as you say, that sort of front lit bird portrait has been done so many times.
Yeah, it's boring at this point. Yeah.
At this point in my, in my photographic career, that sort of thing is boring. I do take them because sometimes I want to use them for reference guides or in articles or whatever I might be doing. But photographically, and from that perspective, I find it pretty, not boring as such, but dull. Perhaps
diagnostic.
Yeah, exactly. I want something that when I look at it, I go, oh yeah, no, I really like that. I really like that because it's something a bit different. I haven't quite seen that approach before. That's kind of what I'm looking for. And I think that's what a project will give you. It will give you the ability to experiment
Yeah.
and take you on that iterative journey as we talked about before. So
Speaking of that journey, I often wonder, Rob, if it's easier to be a landscape photographer and then turn into wildlife. I find that landscape photographers, they have a really good grasp on composition, on light, on more expansive scenes than if you start with wildlife. Most people start with those diagnostic shots, and I think it's a much easier journey coming in from a landscape, or at least the eye of a landscape
mm.
photographer, than someone just documenting and taking shots of just different animals.
Well,
So
funny
I
you should
wonder
say
about
that because that's my sort of entry into wildlife was really from that landscape.
yeah.
My love of the outdoors, and that's how I was I was interested in landscape photography first, and then wildlife came afterwards. But you're right. I mean, when you're focused on a subject and it's filling the frame, where's the thought about composition? Because it's almost done for you, but you don't really need to think. You just need the
Mhm.
animal in the frame. Whereas when you start taking a step back and you start adding a lot more elements in, then you've got to compose those elements. And when something's moving around or flying around, that is much more difficult to do. But you're right. I think those sort of wider shots, as we've talked about before, much more difficult
Yeah,
to
especially
do
from
for
a
that very
composition
reason.
standpoint. I agree. Yeah. Different
Yeah.
usages of light and stuff. But yeah, it's interesting. So would you agree with that since you came into the field from a landscape perspective?
I think I would, yeah, because you do understand, composition. I think much much better if you've had that sort of background and you look at things in that way. And I said you do have this sort of understanding of light, and it's like the sort of early, the sort of first few hours of daylight and the last few hours of daylight, always the best for landscape. Although you can use light throughout the day if you're if you're inventive. The same with wildlife.
Yeah.
But no, I would agree with that. I think that once you have that sort of eye for that detail, I think that can bring another element into your wildlife photography for sure.
Yeah.
Which is why I think as photographers we should always look at other genres of the craft, and go, what can I take from portrait photography? What can I take from landscape photography? What can I take from street photography? And I listen to podcasts and I watch YouTube videos from people that specialize in all these areas, because I'm interested in photography in general anyway. And I'm not beyond taking a portrait myself, or if I lived in an urban environment, perhaps I would do a bit more street photography. Although I think you've got to have some balls to do that. Actually, taking pictures of people, I think takes some
Yeah.
nerve, which I don't possess. At least animals can't answer you back or get annoyed because you're taking their picture without consent.
Yeah,
So
I'd rather face an angry Canada goose than somebody on the subway. That's for sure. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Although I'm not sure about perhaps a brown bear or something. I think I might draw the line with that. I wouldn't want them angry.
You're right though, Rob. I mean, there's different aspects of photography. Like if you look at landscape photographers, they're so great when it comes to lines and curves and compositions to incorporate that in animal scapes, or using space and wildlife images. Invaluable. Even portrait photographers when it comes to light on the face and textures, detail, understanding what expression you want to capture. All that stuff bleeds into wildlife photography. It's
Yeah,
good to study that.
yeah. There's a lot to learn. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
you know again, capturing personalities of things. And I did do a bit of portrait photography in my time, and they what portrait photographers always say is it's not actually the skill of taking, or the technical skill of taking the photograph. It's developing the relationship with the subject, which
Mm.
is the most difficult thing. It's the key thing. And if you can't do that, you can never get your subject relaxed. You can never sort of develop that relationship with the subject, which allows you to have that intimacy that's required to produce a really good portrait. And I think, you could take a lot from that into wildlife photography, and the
Yeah.
discussions we've had in previous podcasts, I think with Georgina, in fact, was that sort of the more you get to know wildlife, the more it is comfortable with you, then the more relaxed it's going to be, the more natural behavior it's going to display, and the better the outcome in the photograph.
Yeah.
So I think that's another takeaway from
I agree.
this.
You can't beat natural behavior. And to a trained eye, and most people in the wildlife photography community who've been doing this for a while, you can tell natural behavior versus something that's manipulated or forced. It's quite
Yeah.
easy.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, there you go. There's another subject for a podcast. It's like, how can we use, other genres of photography in our wildlife photography?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't think about it. I haven't thought about it as much, but as we were talking through it, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Because um, I personally think it's much harder to excel in the art of wildlife photography if you start as just a wildlife photographer, because it's frame filling, diagnostic shots. And the next step is, okay, rule of thirds. I don't want to put my subject in the center, but after that, it gets progressively harder to start expanding and incorporating different things if you don't have that eye. You have to train yourself. Or maybe you do. Some people are naturals. I've seen that as well. But
Yeah, I think it's harder to train yourself to see these things. I mean, I was kind of fortunate that I never really thought about it. I had that, or I have that natural ability just to piece things together, and to me it just looks right. I don't go through this sort of mental checklist, if you like.
yeah,
It's
it's a
like,
feeling, right? More than it
it's
is.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a feeling, and I think that helps when you look at something and you go, I want to break the rules. I don't sit there and think, to myself, I'm going to break the rules here. I just do it because I think it
Yeah.
looks right in that situation. And then when you're looking at the thing on the screen, you go, yeah, I actually, I kind of, that's a bit of a strange place to, or to put something. It's not, that doesn't really follow the rule book. Not that
Mhm.
I think there is a rule book in photography, quite frankly, but there are guidelines that people try and stick to. But do you not think that perhaps the guidelines that people have in their heads are, when perhaps somebody doesn't have as natural ability to see things as perhaps somebody like I do, and they're trying to learn the process? So it is, you can then do have this sort of mental checklist, because I do it myself with things that I'm not particularly good at. I'll have a checklist. I've got to, okay, have I done this? Have I done that? Have I done, oh, great, everything's in line.
Yep.
With photography, I don't do that. I don't look at, is that, is that right? Is that whatever in the right position for the rule of thirds? Is that, I never ever look at a picture like that. I never break it down in my mind in that way. When I'm
Mhm.
looking through the viewfinder, I just look through the viewfinder. Does it look right to me, or does it not?
Yeah. I
And if
think
it
it's
doesn't,
iterative to what you were saying.
yeah,
Yeah, I think for most people, a lot of it's confidence. The more you shoot, the more you get out there, the more material you produce, and then at a certain point, I think your confidence level gets to a certain state where you're like, okay, I'm going to experiment now, and I'm going to, social media probably helps. Competitions help. I mean, look at what we've been looking at in wild art for the past 2 years, Rob. I mean, some of the best photography, wildlife photography in the world. So, I think being exposed to different photographers, looking at different styles, a lot of that helps people think outside the box. But I think a lot of it has to do with confidence. Once photograph a certain subject or a type of photography, after a while you become more accustomed, and then you start thinking outside the box and taking more chances. That seems to be the natural evolution for most.
yeah. Well, looking at some of the pictures that come in from wild art, it's it's quite intimidating.
It is.
When
It
you
is.
look at what people are doing, and and a lot of those images, if you from the discussions that we've had with the photographers when they come on to the to the awards presentations, very very few of those pictures are one-offs.
Yeah.
They've come across a situation and they've just taken advantage of it. Most of them are the result of planning and taking images again and again and again and going through this iterative process that we've been talking about to improve to improve the result, or to improve the particular technique that they then
Mhm.
employed somewhere else and got a particularly good shot. So I think from that perspective, I think projects can really help you that way as well. I
Yeah.
mean, I just
Most
think they
most are close to home projects, as you were saying. Most of the winners that I can think of, local. Rare I can't remember when we had a winner where the story was, it was a quick trip to another continent and, oh, there it was, and I took the snapshot. I mean,
well, maybe
rarely.
Dan Dory's picture of the fox, perhaps,
Oh, yes, yes,
springs to
the,
mind
in
as
eyes, yeah.
yeah, yeah. That was pretty cool. But and that was obviously a locational thing. But I mean, how often would you go to, I think you were touching on earlier, spend a shed load of money going to a location and then going, do you know what? I may only see this animal once, so I'm not interested in taking just the standard shot. I'm going to go all artistic and try and take something
Mm,
different right from the get go. You'd never,
yeah.
well, I wouldn't think like
No,
that.
that's
You
not the
want some,
norm,
you want
absolutely.
some bankers first, wouldn't you? You want to
Yeah,
record the fact that you'd seen it, take your literal shots, if you like, and then move on. Well, you may not have that opportunity to do it in that
yeah.
circumstance. Whereas at home, it doesn't, as you said earlier, if you miss the shot, it doesn't matter because you can go again tomorrow.
And it's hard too. I mean, so many people now, there's so many more photographers, they're all traveling to these locations. I'm actually not as I don't have a strong drive anymore to photograph penguins. I mean, not that I'll pass it up, but photograph penguins or bears, or, because so many people are going out and they're doing the same stuff over and over again. So, from an artistic standpoint, it's not really a huge drive. What's more of a drive for me to get to some of these places, if I can and when I can, I don't think a lot of this stuff's gonna be around in 20 years or 30, who knows,
Yeah.
So it's kind of a sad thing. I mean, we're going through, again, my opinion, but a global extinction. And, I just don't know how much longer some of these animals are gonna be around. So that drives me, I think, more to get to some of these out of the way places than it does coming up with something that's a creative photograph, which would be very hard to do in light of how often they're shot.
Yeah, exactly. And how much time you actually have when you're there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going out and you're looking to photograph wolves, for example,
Ugh,
you've
very
got.
difficult. I can
I mean,
attest to that.
it's difficult even to see them, let alone
Yeah.
photograph them, let alone then try and photograph them in a different way that other people haven't thought of. So, yeah, you're
We
on a whole
tried
bunch
to
of levels.
photograph, what is it, the Wapiti Pack, which is in Yellowstone National Park. And they'll venture, these wolves will venture in and out of the park, unfortunately, because they're being persecuted now, which is ridiculous. But, we'll come across them, but they're what I would call pepper flakes. I mean, it's not even really a photograph. They're just way in the distance. But being able to get close to these animals and see them is almost spiritual. I mean, they're beautiful animals, and again, it's just another story. You could tell thousands of these stories across the globe of persecution. Are they going to make it? Are
Mm.
they not? It's tough. So that's more the drive, I think, for me recently, is to just see these animals while they're alive rather than in a storybook. It's sad to say, but
And do you find yourself just putting your camera down and just
yeah,
enjoying the moment?
yeah, many times. Because, well, it's incredible to photograph, and it's something it's what I prefer to do. It's what's a passion of mine. But you miss some of that experience, to be honest, if you're
Mm.
photographing. If you see something and you're anticipating the moment, you have the lens up, and you're pulling the trigger, you're taking shots, but it's a bit different to take it in and really take it in. When you're photographing something, you have your mind is working, I think, in a couple different directions. Well, what's the right shutter speed? Should I adjust my exposure? What should the frame be like? So all these things are going on. And while you're appreciating the moment, you're not one with the moment. You're only one with the moment, I think, is if the lens and the camera is down on the seat or
Yeah.
it's on the ground and you're experiencing it. That said, if it's a hell of a moment, you want that
Yeah,
photograph for
you do, but I
yeah,
have to say that my drive to photograph absolutely every moment of something has drifted away as I've got older,
yeah,
and my appreciation of what I'm seeing has sort of substituted itself for that
yeah,
drive, and I think that I enjoy things a lot more because of it, and just enjoy the experience. Do you know what? If I don't come away with a photograph, I really don't mind anymore, because
yeah.
I I think, with a commercial brain on, I always wanted to take a picture of this species and that species, and I can add to my library and my collection and this, that, and the other. But now I just think, well, what's the point? Because a lot of those images that I would have been taking are quite sort of straightforward, literal thing, and there are thousands of pictures just like it out there. So my taking it is only satisfying my own desires, not creating something that's actually going to be useful for other people.
Hmm.
So when you start looking at it like that and then breaking it down and saying, well, actually, I'd rather just enjoy the moment here rather than taking images that I'm just going to keep on my hard drive and never look at again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas, if you then cross that with a situation where, you might be relaxed, you might have some really nice light, you might have something, a bit out of the ordinary going on in front of you for whatever reason, and you've taken something a little different, then that's much more valuable to me now.
I agree. I agree. I find myself not photographing sunsets and sunrises as much. I like to take them in. It helps if there's no animal around because I'm not tempted. But
Yeah.
yeah, I still like to take those in without even taking any images. To see a sunrise or watch a sunset, I don't know. It's still special.
And I actually think that not being able to carry a heavy rucksack around anymore, or not without severe consequences for me, with the sort of long-term damage that I've got to my lower back, as most photographers of my age probably have, um, I find it quite liberating in a way, because you're not carrying cameras around with you all the time, and it gives you the opportunity just to enjoy these things. You go, okay, so I can't take a picture of that sunset. Am I bothered? No,
Yeah.
I'm really not anymore. Which sounds
Or even just
strange, but
having one lens, a one camera body and a one
yeah.
lens setup, and whatever comes across, you pick up your camera and you take the shot, and you force yourself to shoot with that combination versus having, a backpack with all different camera or all the maybe two body. When I go to Africa is a good example. You have maybe two camera bodies, a bunch of lenses, and you're constantly mixing and matching, and it adds stress and it forces the event and the ultimate shot versus having it come naturally and come through feeling. And that's what you want, the latter, not the former.
I think that's something else that I want to work on this year, is just going out with one camera and one lens.
Yeah.
You know,
It's fun.
and then, because then you don't have a choice, and you concentrate on that one thing. And I think you're going to get more out of it. I think it's sort of going back to the fishing analogy. If you go out with a bunch of rods, okay, and you bait them all up, and they're all out there, so you might have 3 or 4 rods or whatever, you're not concentrating on any one of them. You're just thinking, the more baits I've got in the water, the more chance I've got. I don't actually agree with that. I think if you have the one rod and you're concentrating on that, and you're moving it around and you're working, your chance is probably far greater than you did if you had 4 rods with 4
Yeah,
baits that you're not paying attention to. And I think that's the same when it comes down to cameras and lenses. And I'm the world's worst at this. I want to take every lens with me, and then I can't decide how I want to shoot this thing. And then halfway through the trip, I can't be bothered to take my backpack off and change the lens. It's such a
yeah, yeah.
faff. You just think, oh, I can't be asked with this. It's just, I'll just shoot that with the macro that I've got or on at the moment, or so it becomes pointless. And I think actually, if you free yourself of all that equipment and you just take one camera, one lens, and go and see what you can do with it, I actually think that will release a lot more of the sort of creative process in you than
Definitely.
actually going out with a full backpack. So that's something else I want to really delve into this year.
it does it for me, and I'll say the natural disposition, if I have a few options, and for most people, you wanna get closer, so almost always the longest lens comes out, and that's not the best option. I mean, most of the stuff that we see, I think that when it comes to, and again, this is all goes to taste, but, 70 to 200, I mean, that's a lens where some of my favorite photographs come out of that lens.
Mm.
It's focal length, and most people wouldn't pull that out. If you have a 600, they'd probably pull the 600 out because I don't know. It just most people seem to want to be closer or get as close as they can when they find an animal, um, but that's not always the best thing, obviously.
But I think, the sort of long lens syndrome, the sort of, I almost feel that the 600 millimeter prime is almost seen as a uniform
Yeah,
for wildlife photography. I,
yeah,
as I said before, I don't have one because I just don't see the point in investing £10,000 plus on a lens that I'm not going to use very much.
yeah. And a lot of photographers get that because they want. It's almost it's an identity thing, as I think you were
Yeah,
just insinuating. I was trying to photograph some short-eared owls, which are local right now. They winter in some of the marshes, and this I didn't know the photographer, but he asked me. He pulled up next to me, and he has showed his camera lens was a 600. He's got
of
the
course.
camouflage around it.
Yeah, yeah, the camouflage
Have you
around it.
seen
Yeah.
any short-eared owls? And I said, well, there's two flying around. I'm waiting to see. So he pulls in front of me, gets out of the vehicle, takes a big video tripod, sets it up on the ball, and so I'm like, okay, well, if you're out of your car and you're set up wearing really bright colors, it's probably not going to fly by. And I mean, he probably just started. It was quite clear, he wasn't seasoned in this type of photography, but it was.
What's the expression? All the gear and no idea. Is that the
I
one?
think, yeah, it was kind of along those lines, and I was trying to help him and make some suggestions or whatever, but I just, politely pulled away and went further down to, leave him some space because the owl was not going to come close to us because he was standing outside of the car. But I think it's for a lot of people getting that lens and showing that lens and the gear. It's a statement, more than
Yeah,
it is a utility sometimes. But
it is. And I just find that if I had a lens like that, I would find it difficult to take the sort of images that I like to take because it wouldn't be so free in the hand
yeah,
because it's so heavy. It's not as versatile as the lenses that I like to use. So it just doesn't suit me as a photographer. It just doesn't suit my style. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. It's what you want to take. It's how you want to go about it. But I almost feel like everybody follows the crowd. If you've not got a 600 millimeter prime attached to your camera with wrapped in camo, coating, then you can't be a serious wildlife photographer.
yeah. I've seen some some crazy setups. There's this place we have called Conowingo Dam, and it's a big place to photograph bald eagles, mostly in the fall.
I've
but
heard of
even
it.
around this
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
yeah. And I'll see some photographers show up where they'll have a 500 millimeter and a 600 millimeter on one tripod setup, and they'll be moving. I'm like, what? I've seen, you know, uh, chairs that rotate, all kinds of crazy stuff. It's actually
What
fun.
you
It's
mean?
part of the experience.
A bit like Star Wars in the when they've got their
Absolutely.
yeah,
Like
they're
Adat
shooting down
Walker
the
style.
X-wings.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's fun. I'm not being critical. Like, it's part of the experience, but it's amazing to see how gear can be part of your identity in the wildlife photography
Yeah.
scene. It's
Well, add
whereas
all that lot up. Add up the camera, the
oh,
lens, the
we call it the
gimbal,
$1,000,000
the
fence. Yeah.
tripod. Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Go remortgage your house.
Yeah, exactly. And then
Yeah.
there's always, and I'll kind of chuckle a little bit because when you buy photography gear, it's meant to be used. You'll have, and everything looks pristine. You'll have a $15,000-$16,000 setup, and they'll have a little cloth, and they're taking the dust off during and I'm thinking, oh my god, probably don't want to look at my gear anytime soon. But
Well, they're probably outside their houses washing their cars every Sunday as well.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's right.
Anyway, having destroyed a lot of Sorry, people. We just awful.
Just insure your gear and do whatever you want.
Yeah,
with it.
we don't really. We're only poking fun in a good way. Anyway, we've been going for over an hour, actually, Josh. Should we?
Oh wow!
I said to Josh before we started recording, let's make this a shorter one because but could we tend to sort of record this quite late at night for me because of the time difference. And obviously work and everything else, so it's actually 1:45 in the morning. What's sort of next for you in the next couple of weeks? What you're planning?
Pretty much getting out as much as I can. Owls are still around, but mostly it's going to be about the swans and whatever ducks are in the cove, and see what I can do to play around with different forms of light, different compositions. That's going to be that'll be the big push, and things will be moving out before you know it. Come March, these birds will be flying out, and stuff. Egrets will be coming back. Osprey will be back.
Yeah, of course.
So there'll be a lot of change coming soon.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think it's going to be back to the water birds that I love so much, and see what's going on there, because I haven't even walked around the lakes in weeks. So get on and start to get my feet wet, metaphorically and probably.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how you make out with the getting in the water. That should be fun.
Yeah, so that's on the way. And I said to you before we came on air that I'd seen my first snowdrop actually appear the other day. So there'll be all that sort of spring flower photography again, sort of coming into view very, 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 very soon. So I'm looking to do a few more, a few different things there. So yeah, I've got a few sort of projects around that in my mind. So I hope that sort of helped everybody sort of think about your photography over the next sort of 12 months or so over the course of this year, and maybe giving you a few ideas for your own projects. It'd be interesting for people to leave some comments perhaps on the podcast, and as to what you'll be up to, as long as we've done something that is thought-provoking and will hopefully help your photography over the course of the year. That's the whole point of it, and hopefully we've been a bit entertaining as well with our rambles and and our tangents. But anyway, Josh, thanks very much. Let's get a guest on again, and perhaps I'll see if we can get our underwater photographer friend on for a chat.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That would be an interesting discussion. So anyway, I'll try and line something up. Anyway, thanks for everybody for listening, and we'll see you all again next time.
Thanks all. Thanks, Rob.
You have been listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast. If you have enjoyed the content, then please help us to spread the word by sharing a link on your social media platforms, giving us a like, and leaving us a comment. See you all again next time.